All right. A couple of videos to look at here. I think we're going to skip the history section just because I'm getting a late start of this. And yeah. But anyways, worst red flags I've ever seen as a therapist by Dr. K. So let's get into this.
The most selfish person you know is at therapy being told they're allowed to be selfish sometimes. Somewhere out there, the worst person you know is being fed an Instagram graphic on their algorithm telling them it's okay to put themselves first, right? So,
Now, isn't there that whole thing on planes where they say literally put the mask on yourself first and then whatchamathingy, then put it on the person next to you? I would like to think like that there's some truth to the notion that taking care of yourself is on some level, like trying to be a better person at the very least, is good for other people as well. But in the same way, I like the notion of self-sacrifice. I like the idea of being willing to, if you're in a situation where it's mutually exclusive, your life or another person's, that you're the person who's willing to sacrifice their life for the other person. I feel like society probably works better that way, like where there are, patriotic individuals or just altruistic individuals. Seems to work better, I think. But it feels like putting yourself first, like the tone of it has more to do with the type of self-love doctrine that's being pushed these days, which I think is at the very least taken to an extreme, perhaps.
So, do therapists know when their patient is actually the villain? One of the most toxic people.
He was about to say vision, wasn't he? I don't know if it's a Freudian. I don't know how that would be a Freudian slip. Doesn't really make any sense in this scenario.
I know has been seeing the same therapist for about 5 years with no change in their behavior / life.
They said toxic,
mind you. And I just have to
high maintenance.
Wonder if this therapist secretly knows that her client is actually the problem. The person I know, M, is just truly awful to everyone around her, but she is constantly raving about her therapist and how her therapist tells her that everyone else is the villain in her story, that her mom is a narcissist, her sister is a sociopath.
I feel like, just on principle, this kind of BS if your psychiatrist is telling you about everyone else in your life. Like, aren't they supposed to be kind of analyzing you, not the people in your life? And technically, they could say, maybe in that scenario, yeah, they were in the wrong, probably. But it feels like, again, you're the client. You're the one they're supposed to be analyzing, not your family, and not your friends, or whatever the crap. I guess maybe just tangentially that they should be analyzing your friends and family, but man, I don't know. It just feels maybe all too affirmative or affirming. I've thought about this notion that I think I would tend to be more mistrusting of like the FDA organizations or the people who actually put out the drugs than the doctors themselves. It feels like the people who put out medication and drugs, they're the ones who are actively incentivized to have people use those drugs and have like hook people in. Whereas I feel like doctors quite often can maybe, like, given how much effort they put into it, given how much they're invested into it, like, I have a hard time believing they're just these con men or money grubbing little bastards, right? I'm not saying they're all perfect, but it feels like the selection bias for people who want to become doctors, not to mention just the training that they have to go through, I don't know if you would get a lot of like shysters involved there. It's a huge investment for what they would maybe get out of. I tend to think, but again, I don't know exactly where I was going with this. Again, like I tend to distrust the people who manufacture the drugs more so than the doctors themselves. But I wonder if there could be some of this in psychiatry where they do get paid if the person keeps coming back. I imagine there could be some doctors themselves who, like, I guess maybe not like a surgeon or something, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm saying I do think there are scenarios in which a psychiatrist might be incentivized to fix the problem slowly. Again, I would like, even psychiatrists have to go through, so maybe, forget it. Forget it. It was stupid. Pretend I didn't say anything.
I've never heard of a therapist casually diagnosing family members with personality disorders. Does this therapist like
Except for the part about the FDA thing, for the people who produce the drugs. That part I think is true. Possibly.
likely know that M is actually the villain? So this is a really great question, right? So if you're a therapist, do you know when your patient could be the villain? It's kind of an interesting question, right? Like, do we know? And this is where I would say a couple of things. The first is that I think it's like super scary, but I have had so many patients who have people in their life.
You wonder like how they would deal with that actually. If they do actually believe that the client is like a truly evil person, like what would a psychiatrist actually do in that scenario? How they handle it? Would they refuse to treat them or something? Oh, so I'm assuming like psychiatrist client confidentiality. I don't know how far that can really go. Like I'm assuming if their client actually commits a crime, I guess I don't know. I don't know.
Who are in therapy for years. And
so I'm assuming like I could see where lawyers would have to be confidential even if they know that their client has committed a crime. But like psychiatrists, like how strong is that? Because you have like NDAs or whatever, and I'm pretty sure those cannot protect you in the case of like an actual crime being committed. It's just the case of like proprietary documentation or maybe just, the way the business works, something you can't reveal anything more benign to competitors or to publicity stuff or whatever the crap. But I'm pretty sure an NDA is null and void if there's actually something illegal going on. I don't know how if that would work for like psychiatrists or
it appears that from my lens of working with my patient, that the person in their life is basically not that their therapist is missing this person's personality disorder. And it's shocking. Like I would say the most common example of this is I will be working with someone who is dating someone who has borderline personality disorder. And that person is in therapy, but the therapist seems to think that they have severe anxiety. Bipolar disorder is a very common misdiagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And so it seems like they just are working with them for years and like nothing.
Fight. I wonder who he was talking about here.
Thing is getting better. Now,
it does occur to me that it'd be kind of cool to have like a podcast where I don't know if it'd really be feasible because obviously they probably can't say who they're talking about or like actually have a scenario where they're both treating someone for different psychological disorders, and then they get together and say, "Oh no, you're wrong about such and such. He said this about your client." Like it'd be kind of interesting to see, though.
Is that actually what's going on? Like, I don't know, right? Because the problem with that is in my shoes is my patient is in a relationship with someone with BPD. They have a therapist. And I'm like, oh my God, the therapist is misdiagnosing them. But maybe it's my patient who is narcissistic or borderline or whatever and represents this other person in a bad light. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that as a therapist, I believe that there are many therapists who misdiagnose their patients. They misdiagnoses in their patients. Now, the other scary thing is that when I say therapists do this, do I do this? Almost certainly, right? So there's like no reason to think that I am impervious.
How dare you assume that?
As to what my colleagues may experience as well. But what I can say is that when
I wonder like how much of it is just down to the person's description of the situation, because they're both getting it from a different point of view. As a person, Bible, everyone seems correct until the other person comes along and pleads their case. The person that says it first always seems completely justified in what they're doing until the other person comes along and gives their side of it. Like it is, you kind of have to have a comparative analysis a little bit, I think, or a different perspective on some of those issues, because it will always sound completely, unless the person is extremely unlikable or idiotic, it probably will sound pretty good on first hearing. Like if you're the first person that gets to bring your story forward until the other person gets their word in edgewise, it's probably going to sound pretty good, pretty convincing. Because I tend to think that's the way it unfolds.
I work with people, I oftentimes find personality problems. Like I see a lot of narcissism, I see a lot of sociopathy, I see a lot of borderline characteristics. And there are certain signs. So like if you, I mean, this is maybe me being arrogant here, but it's not just me. I think I was taught by many therapists to detect people who are narcissistic, right? So one key thing that I've learned is that if
actually, it's kind of interesting. I should watch this sometime, maybe on one of the Point Left study ones, where Dr. K interviewed a Mr. Pirate Software, aka Thor. I don't know if that's his actual name. It's kind of a cruel thing to name a child, but I guess. Thor Hall, I think. He's a YouTuber who this guy interviewed, and I believe one of the things he said was, like, I think Pirate Software was saying something to the effect where, oh, people perceive this as being arrogant, but actually it's whatever. And Dr. K like really called him out on it. For the record, Pirate Software, I don't know what he's been up to recently, but I know a while back he kind of did something almost refreshingly adultish, where he kind of came out. There was some sort of game that he had been meaning to bring out, and he just came out and said, it's my fault. We couldn't get it done. Like, don't blame any of the employees or anything like that. It was a very kind of a stand-up thing to do. So respect him for that. As far as the rest of it, he's been in the whole thing involving the stop killing games thing, where he's very opposed to it. And I don't know if he really knows what's going on, or if at this point he's just too stubborn to admit that he might have been wrong about it. But yeah, okay. Enough rabbit trails.
If I have a patient who is surrounded by people who are problematic,
laser focus.
This person mistreats me, this person mistreats me, this person mistreats me. The patient is somehow responsible for that. Now, I want to be clear about this, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the patient is personality disordered. Okay, this person is abusive, this person is abusive, this person is abusive. The key thing there is that it could be that my patient is narcissistic and thinks that everybody is abusive.
It's kind of weird the way that works, where like I tend to think that the way in which you observe or experience the thing determines the way in which you think about it, right? So you have the basic level of humanity, where we all, in theory, tend to observe things pretty much the same way. We all see the sun coming up in the morning, going down in the west in the evening, right? All of us observe that thing happening. So you have the base level of observations, which is pretty much the same across humanity. Very fundamental. It's not really a question of, oh, goodness gracious. Where was I? I think I was saying something to the effect that, like, we all have this kind of basic level of observation, the really fundamental things we observe. But then on top of that, you have the way in which we make sense of observations. And that is intriguing, because, like, the way in which people make sense of observations and whatnot, that's far more variable with regards to the perspectives we form or the theories we craft to explain our experiences. It's a really intriguing subject. All right. Let's get back into this.
Or it could be that my patient has certain relationship patterns where they enter into relationships with people who regularly abuse them. That when someone treats them kindly, they actually freak out. They don't know what's going on. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and they run away from the good relationships in their life. So one of the key things that
okay, maybe I'm the type of person he's talking about here, but I tend to think there is almost this type of vibe you can get where, like, a person is acting way too nice. Like, and you're just like, okay, there's no way they can be this nice all the time. Right? No one is nice all the time. At some point, there has to be some flaws. Right? Am I crazy there? Does not feel like there are some people who maybe, I don't know. That seems to be that would be my logic in any case.
I sort of think about as a therapist is, how is my patient responsible for their situation in life? Even when if it's someone who's like, let's say I have a patient who says, this person is taking advantage of me. In a weird way, I still kind of blame the patient in the sense that, okay.
Victim blaming, huh? Did you ask them what they were wearing as well? I'm joking. I'm joking.
Okay, you are doing something that allows them to take advantage of you. So I think very heavily from a lens of what is my patient's role and responsibility in their life. And even if other people are bad to you, you may be able to do something that can change that, because ultimately we can't control them, right? So the field that we play on is like what the two of us can figure out and how my patient can actually change. So that's what I kind of focus on. The interesting thing is I do have a lot of patients that I think are, have features of sociopathy, narcissism, BPD. And I see those things. I can see, and I'll give you guys a couple of examples of what this looks like. I keep seeing comments, Dr. K, how do I apply this to a situation in my life? That's literally why we created a coaching program. Are working with you week to week to help you develop a plan to create lasting change. So if y'all are interested, check out the link in the description below.
There you go. Healthygamer.gg coaching. Whatever the crap.
So number one is if I have a patient who has a very strong external locus of control, this is a big problem.
So what talk about? The last couple of things. Well, I said the last couple of things. I think last week and the week before that, we had looked at a podcast between George Mack and Chris Williams. And that guy, actually, I want to look up some of this, but he does. I don't know if he actually has his own YouTube channel, but he kind of talks about the notion of agency a lot. And he had shown this picture of two people stranded on a desert island. One of them uses a whole bunch of sticks to create a sign that says help. And the other uses the sticks to create a raft and is rowing to safety, presumably. It's kind of an interesting way of looking at the notion of agency versus non-agency or whatever. I think. Again, we'll have to look at one of his videos one of these days.
External locus of control. When I have a patient who comes in who says, the things in my life happen because things outside of me control my life. So that's an external locus of control. Where is the center of control in your life? Society is this way, your boss is this way, your parents are...
It feels like that's kind of a balancing act, because I think you should learn to depend on others, but you should also learn to be your own man, if that makes sense. You should learn to be self-reliant as much as is possible. I feel like that's part of becoming an adult in a lot of ways. Like learning to be as strong as you possibly can, learning to be as capable as you possibly can. Am I crazy? That does seem like it's a good thing, at the very least. You can't always depend on other people, and other people won't always be there to depend on. Again, it feels like it's kind of a balancing act.
This way, your wife is this way, your husband is this way. Where is the power in the relationship? And now sometimes that can be narcissism, but it's not always. So that's kind of what I think about. Does the patient feel empowered, or are they just a victim to everything going on around them? And then the second thing is, even if they sort of play the victim, I think this is a really important point to understand. A lot of people think that therapy is about talking about your feelings. So you come in and you talk about, oh, this person did...
I can't say I wouldn't have gotten that idea a little bit. And it's probably just mostly from TV series or whatever the crap. But you do tend to almost think of it like that. But yeah, I guess I would have maybe thought some of it's breakthroughs, but I would have thought a lot of it's just hey, blah 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 blah. Let's talk about what happened this week. Expressing, talk it out type thing. Express yourself, which can be good, I suppose. I think one of the issues we face in society a lot these days is literally just that people used to have communities, really strong communities, and it's been kind of subsumed under a faux online version of that same thing. That's meant to be a substitute, but it just really isn't, I don't think.
This and this person this, and I feel this way and I feel this way. And there are forms of psychotherapy that are like that. So something called supportive psychotherapy is an example of psychotherapy that's just supportive. So patient comes in every week, you just try to do your best to support them. Now, sometimes this is what people need. If their life is genuinely falling apart and they have nowhere to turn to, they just need one place to go for 1 hour a week where they just vent everything out, where we're not working on what's your responsibility. We're not working on what to to change. They're just carrying so much weight that they need to unburden it some. They need to vent some.
See, I would say that's kind of what friends are for. But if you don't have friends, by all means, get a shrink. That's I was thinking about that. Head Shrinkers Unite. Great idea for a podcast. Shrinkers Unite? No, Head Shrinkers Unite. That sounds classy. $1 million idea.
Then supportive psychotherapy is fine. The other thing is if you look at, patients with a history of something like Down syndrome or patients who have lower IQ, supportive psychotherapy is one of the most effective forms of psychotherapy for those people. That doesn't mean that if it's effective for you, that means you have low IQ, but
I would never in a million years have guessed that, really. I wouldn't have thought of it as being really correlated at all. But hey.
For certain populations where supportive psychotherapy is very effective. But for me, when I work with people and their emotions, the goal is to decompress the emotion so that the emotion no longer clouds your thinking. And then you should be able to see the situation, right? So yeah, this person, you get this person a gift and they never give you a gift and that hurts. You feel angry, you feel frustrated, so be it, right? Let's get those emotions out. But then what? So what comes next? Now that we understand that you feel taken advantage of, and sure, you're entitled to your feelings, but then what? What are we going to do about it? What comes next? And there are some therapists who don't push for that. And this is the really tricky thing. So it's easy for me to say, hey, I don't think that is effective, but that's wrong. See, this is important to understand. I suck at that. I'm pretty bad at supportive psychotherapy. So one of the key things about being a therapist is you have to understand that just because...
See, that's kind of the weird thing too. You'd maybe think of therapists as kind of all employing the same strategies to try and help/fix people, which might not be the case. I wouldn't have really thought of there's being I would have probably thought of trauma counselors or that type of thing as being kind of one type of subset, but I don't think those people are always necessarily PhD psychologists, therapists, or whatever. Those are maybe just sometimes, I imagine, just people who've gone through it themselves or something like that. But
you're not good at a modality doesn't mean that the modality isn't effective, right? So it could be that, it's sushi is disgusting because I don't know how to make good sushi. So it's very possible that other psychotherapists are being supportive with their narcissistic clients and they are making progress. So I had a brilliant supervisor who once told me, it was after 3 years that we made a breakthrough. And my reaction was, what the hell were you doing for the first 2.5? Why does it take 3 years?
So that's I don't maybe there is some compiling effect that all of his therapy was having at it, but it feels like at that point the therapy and the psychologist seem almost incidental. You were trying for 3 years and all of a sudden it just happened. It was either a very hard nut to crack or there was some external factor involved, I would tend to think. How do you determine what the causal factor was? It was literally just, no, it was the therapy all along. It was just they needed more of that therapy for no, that seems a bit sus as an explanation. It's there would have maybe been external factors. Speculation on my part, I suppose.
To make a breakthrough. Because there's this presumption in especially fields like psychoanalysis and psychodynamic therapy that therapy is kind of a long-term, intense, slow, fertilized, growing kind of process. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but...
See, I was thinking that, maybe it is, but you would think you would get results a little bit sooner, right? Right? If the actual psychology and the therapy sessions were the thing, you would think you would get some correlated results a little bit sooner, in my mind.
I have to wonder, from almost a randomized controlled trial standpoint, out of those 3 years of therapy, how much of that is really necessary? And there are therapists who are far more experienced than me, arguably far more clinically superior. I don't know, because I've never compared my outcomes to their outcomes, who will say, yeah, this is the way that it has to be done. I'll be the first to admit that maybe this is the arrogance of having a little bit of information. But when it comes down to it, I think that most of us know when our patient is the villain. I think most of us can tell because there are conspicuous things that are absent.
It would be interesting to know, also, how like, does it affect the psychologist if they really don't like their client? If it's not just even like an indifference thing. What if they like really don't like their client that much? Like, does that affect their capacity or their ability to do their job at all? I imagine on some level it would have to a little bit.
From their stories, right? Oh, this person cut me off, like this person blocked me, this person complains about me, my boss doesn't recognize my credit, or people at work are ostracizing me, I'm being bullied. And then if we tunnel down into it, is there something missing from that story? So what I really look for is like a sense of like, do things stitch together in a way that makes sense? And one of the
Yeah, I feel like that is kind of the essence of checking a story or like establishing a truth. Like, you corroborate it with other correlating or connected things, right? That's the essence of trials, I think, quite often. You get witness testimony, you get corroborating evidence, and you cross-reference the crap out of all of it. That's kind of the name of the game quite often, with deriving the truth.
trickiest things is, everyone says nowadays that people are entitled to their feelings. Like, you're entitled to feel that way. This is where I got to respectfully disagree a little bit. I think
Based.
some of the emotional reactions that we have, especially
Oh yeah, you go off, man.
with narcissistic patients, are inappropriate to
Just FYI, I don't think he's turning like based in red pill. Well, to be fair, he seems kind of based, but as far as the red pill part or whatever the crap, I don't know if he's going down that road in any case.
the circumstance. Like, I know this is wild, but this is a key, teaching from Buddhism. So in Western psychology, we have this attitude that all feelings are healthy, all feelings are good, and this is like a good
Look, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Like, I didn't think in particular, well, to be clear, I tend to think that there are no unnatural feelings. There's feelings taken to an unnatural extent. So you can have something like desire or ambition that's taken to the point of greed or lust or envy. Like, I think he talks about envy a lot, right? So maybe you would make like standard deviational like categories for that. And generally speaking, I think the worst sorts of emotions or desires are those which are ungovernable, right? Because generally speaking, I feel like if you allow yourself ungovernable desires or appetites, if you indulge those things, it cannot possibly end well. Because in that moment when you indulge that stuff, when you jump on the train and you don't know where the train's going to stop, like, you are at the mercy of your instincts. You will hurt anyone, you will break anything that is in your way to get what you want. And that can be a huge issue. I tend to think like people like coexistence or symbiosis is not in the nature of avaricious people. People that allow themselves the appetite. They're kind of like a black hole of sorts. They eat, they consume, and devour everything around them until at some point they collapse under their own weight and start consuming themselves. I don't know exactly how black holes die, but I think they do die eventually. When they can no longer consume, they fold in on themselves. Not a pretty picture. And again, I would compare that to the notion of people who are avaricious, people who do allow themselves ungovernable behaviors or desires or instincts. Not a good idea. There's not really there's no equilibrium to be had with regards to certain instinctive drives. That's what I would tend to think.
science, evolutionary.
Actually, you guys can look at the rest of yourself. Again, worst red flags I've ever seen as a therapist by Healthy Gamers, GG, aka Dr. K.